Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quirky Inspirations podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure and honor of interviewing a gentleman called Morry Zelcovitch. Have I got that right?
Very good, yes.
Thank you. Morry is sitting with us on the other side of, hang on, where are we? The Pacific. He's in Canada. You are in Canada, aren't you?
I am in Canada, yes.
Yes. So we don't confuse Canadians with Americans because they don't like it. So
I have no problem. Most people think I'm American. I'm fine with that.
That's good. That's good. Kind of getting the Americans and the Canadians muddled up is the same as getting the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, and the Australians. There can be a bit of a rub if you are from the, quotes, smaller nation.
Well, you see, I've had lots of experience with lots of people from all over the world, and I find people everywhere to be very nice. It tends to be a mistake when you judge the individual by their government or by the reputation of their government, because let's face it, government everywhere is, well, this is a different podcast topic, but I'll leave it at that.
we could wax lyrical on that, but this is time-stamped. Okay, so Morry, tell us a bit more about yourself. You're talking about brain entrainment. Now, what's that about? Tell us about who you are. What a bit more about brain entrainment, please.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank you for not saying entertainment. That already makes you stand way above the crowd in podcasting history. Most people are unfamiliar with the term entrainment, and as a result, when they look at the word, they see entertainment because they're quite similar in the way they're spelled. So brainwave entrainment actually utilizes, I'm loath to use the word sound because sound actually doesn't exist, but it utilizes vibratory patterns, let's call it that instead, and light, which is another form of vibration or resonance, to alter one's brainwave activity. So everyone's brain is made up of billions of neurons. Neurons are like nerve cells. They're just a bunch of cells stuck together. The interesting thing about that is they pulse, not like a heart pulses, but they pulse an electric frequency, an electric pulse, if you will. Interesting to use the word pulse to describe a pulse, but they emit an electrical impulse so many times a second, and depending on the region of the brain and the amount of times they pulse that impulse of electricity, that dictates the kind of state they're in. So most people out there are probably familiar with beta and alpha and theta and delta. Some even know gamma. All that really means is it differentiates between how many times the cell is pulsing this electricity, and that dictates the kind of chemistry that cell is producing. And believe it or not, it's the cell's frequency which creates the chemistry, which creates your experience. So if you're happy, if you're bored, if you're excited, if you're in love, if you're this, if you're that, you actually don't feel it, or so you don't experience it, you don't feel it unless your brain creates chemistry that allows you to feel it. So let me translate that into English for everybody now.
Yes, please.
Let's say you go to a restaurant and the chef is like a 5-star Michelin chef, if such a thing exists. And they love their work and they're having a wonderful day and the food is just delicious. Now you go to another restaurant and the individual just broke up with their partner and they're miserable and they found out they're getting laid off tomorrow and they have a cold and their dog just got hit by a car. A lot of bad things have happened to them and they're just miserable and the food tastes like crap. So when your life is good, i.e. tasting good, that's because your brain is creating the right chemical soup, if you will, the right chemistry that allows you to taste life as something delicious. If your life is not what you want it to be, that's probably because you're creating a chemical soup that is creating a dinner, if you will, that tastes lousy, and that's your experience of life. A poorly tasting meal, something that is unsatisfying. All of that is your experience because of neurochemistry, which to a great deal comes from neural activity, which is your thoughts. Every time you have a thought, you create chemistry. Every time you create chemistry, you create an experience. I treat the brain much like a muscle. So if we exercise it the proper way, it gets strong, and anything a muscle can do will do better if it's strong.
Yes.
So that's the whole idea. So brainwave entrainment literally is a pulsation of these frequencies. So it's like on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. And the entrainment process is where we create these pulses outside of the head. And then the brain starts doing a monkey see, monkey do. It starts imitating those pulses. And that's something known as the frequency following response. For those of you who don't believe me, think of the last time you were listening to music you liked and you were just kind of mindlessly bopping your head and tapping your feet. That is actually a form of entrainment. What I do is a little more targeted. So it's targeted to your neurons, it's targeted for specific activity, and it's targeted to release specific chemistry that's designed to give you a different experience of your life. And that's the beautiful thing about brainwave entrainment, because it allows you quite literally to recalibrate and reprogram your experience. You know, I went through 40 years of wanting to be dead and multiple suicide attempts. Obviously, you can see I didn't succeed. So when I couldn't find a way to die, I had to find a way to live. And that's what led me to brainwave entrainment ultimately. But it's the feeling when you're depressed for all that time, and anyone who's ever been depressed for 5 minutes knows what I felt like. Because 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, 50 years, it all feels the same. It feels like it's never going to end. It just feels horrible. Time goes excruciatingly slowly. But if you can feel differently, that is something that is like, it stands out. You know, if you're in a really dark room and there's a pinprick of light, you can probably see that pinprick of light. And that's what entrainment does. It lets you see that pinprick of light. It lets you experience things differently than you're used to experiencing them. And when you feel the difference, you actually can't really help but get some hope and realize that, you know, your life isn't all misery. It doesn't have to be misery. You know, one of the things that I found, and this is me speaking about me now, is that when we're happy, when we're sad, when we're mad, when we're angry, when we're thrilled, when we're excited, when we feel close, when we feel lonely, all of these things are actually nothing more than red lights on the dashboard of our life. So if we talk about a car, it's, you know, you see a red light come on, you take it to the shop, right? Or you put oil in, or brake fluid, or power steering, whatever it's telling you is lacking. Well, it's funny how when the red light comes on in our lives, we get mad, we get agitated, we get depressed, we get this, we get that. We instantly think it's a bad thing that's punishing us, instead of it's a warning system saying, hey, something isn't right. This is why you don't feel right. This is why you don't feel good. Our bodies and our minds are designed to warn us, to tell us when something is wrong. And it's also designed to tell us when it's right again, because when it's wrong, it's not going to feel good. When you start altering your thoughts and you alter what you're doing and you alter what you're eating and all these other things, you will start feeling better. And as you start feeling better, that's telling you you're more and more on the right track. So I encourage people to not ignore these quote unquote bad things and not to prejudge them as bad, because they're really probably just trying to tell you something that you need to know.
Yeah, they're alerters. Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you've given us a scientific empirically doable. You can actually measure it in terms of this is what's generally happening. A lot of people in the self-help arena talk about visualization and how we visualize a situation we would like to be. And have I got this right then, that this is empirical evidence that this works from a different perspective, that it's not only available to you if you visualize? What I think I'm hearing you say is that you can you can train your brain to do this from the external and then mirror what you're hearing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when you're talking like that, I'm feeling like I'm in an altered state now. And I can actually hear in the background, because that's kind of what brainwave entrainment audio sounds like. It's like a shh and bop, 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 bop. And that's how the neurons know what to follow the frequency. It's on, off, on, off, on, off. So when someone is visualizing, there's a number of processes going on. You see, you can visualize very positively, and it can be positive and help you. But visualization can also be incredibly harmful.
Oh, yes.
Just affirmations can be good, and affirmations can be harmful too. You see, if I'm visualizing that I have wealth, maybe I'm imagining I'm at a Mercedes dealership and I'm, cutting a deal for a brand new Mercedes, and it cost me like $180,000 and I'm paying cash for it. So this is what I'm visualizing. That can be a very positive imprint, right? Unless part of your mind is telling you, what are you dreaming about? This is bullshit. You're never going to have that. That can be very self-destructive.
Yes.
What I do, it alters the chemistry, so there is no thought process involved.
Okay.
The brain follows the frequencies that I'm encouraging it to follow as if it was having these positive thoughts, but without the positive thought being a potential negative, because you actually don't have tons of money, or you don't own that house, or you're not in a happy relationship, or this or that or the other thing. It can be very debilitating and very disempowering to think positive visions when you don't have the confidence in them manifesting themselves. See, one of the techniques that I've come up with, I call it the Amazon principle. And I'm not talking about the rainforest. I'm actually talking about the shopping experience. A lot of people have a difficult time imagining that they have something that they don't have because they don't have it yet. I can imagine that it's coming, but the problem with thinking of something in the future is it's always in the future. When you ate lunch yesterday, as an example, do you remember what you ate for lunch or dinner?
Yes.
Okay, good. So when I asked you, do you remember what you had for lunch or dinner? When was it for you that you were remembering?
Yesterday.
No, it was actually now. You can't remember.
See.
Past.
Yes, it was now, but I was remembering yesterday.
Right. You're remembering about yesterday, but you were actually remembering now. So yesterday, when you were actually chewing the food, when was it for you? It wasn't yesterday. When was it?
It was now. Right. Yes.
You can't chew in the past and you can't chew in the future, right? You can only chew now.
Good.
So tomorrow, when tomorrow gets here, it's going to be now also. How you can see now, you can see how that way of thinking gets in the way when you put a vision in the future. It's coming to me means it'll never actually be there.
Tomorrow never comes.
It's coming to me says the future, but the future is always ahead of you.
Yeah.
Because whenever you get wherever you are in time, it's now.
Yes.
So you're sabotaging yourself by saying it's coming to me. So what the Amazon principle is, if anybody, and the reason why I use that as an example is because most people either have friends who have ordered from Amazon, or family who have ordered from Amazon, or they've ordered from Amazon themselves, or something similar, some kind of catalog shopping. So when I buy something from Amazon, let's say I bought this phone case from Amazon, which by the way I did. So when I bought it, I paid for it at the time that I found it. I didn't have it though for 3 days, but I knew it was coming because I've paid for it. It's mine. I got a receipt and I know it's coming.
Yeah.
Now I have the confidence of knowing that even though I don't have it in my hand yet, it's on its way to me. So the Amazon principle says that whatever it is that you want in your life, place a mental order for it. Have faith in that order the same way I have faith in Amazon delivering my phone case. And it will come to you because you will then be inspired to take the action you need to take in order to manifest it. Because ultimately, sitting in a lotus position and being in an altered state, is nice, but it won't get you anywhere. In this world, we have to take action for things to manifest. Just sitting around, it's not going to do anything. So that's what I call the Amazon principle, having the knowledge that something is truly coming to you because you've ordered it.
Mm-hmm.
It's on its way because it's happened before. I've made other orders and they've shown up. I've had other intuitions. I've had other manifestation desires that have come. So when you examine your past, everybody can find things that they wanted to have happen that ended up happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how small it is, but that would be the anchor that you use when you decide that this is something I currently do not have in my pocket, but it is mine and it's being shipped to me as we speak. That helps to change that inner language, that inner dialogue that allows you to actually get what it is that you want, as opposed to always putting it in the future and then wondering why it never comes. Well, because you always put it in the future, kind of like a dog chasing its tail.
I mean, exactly, that the specifics of the words you use are incredibly important.
You say it yourself. All words have
power. Exactly. And not only the ones that we say out loud, which is the ones that most of us focus on, it's particularly the ones that we say in here.
Yeah.
Because that does, as you've just explained, influence how every single cell in the body vibrates,
Sure.
how every single cell functions.
Mm-hmm. And you need to understand that saying it makes you think it more too. So it's really important not to say that negative statement or those negative thoughts out loud. If you feel crappy today and, and I ask you, how do you feel? Say, I'm okay, thanks. The worst you should say is, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. I'm good. Because every time you say something out loud that's negative, it initiates somewhere between 100 to 500, I think, negative thoughts. So just imagine, I feel like crap today. I feel like crap today. I feel like crap today. Well, there's 1,500 to maybe 15,000 negative thoughts that are going to fly into your head and go out. And people don't believe that, but many, many, many years ago, I used to smoke, and I smoked like a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. I only remembered 3 or 4.
Yeah.
How the brain works. So you may think, yeah, right, Morry, I'm thinking 500 or 1,500 or 5,000 negative thoughts. Yeah, right. You'd be surprised. Understanding and having, knowledge is indeed power. Understanding is even more power, because
and
knowledge,
implementing it, the wisdom to implement it, is one stage further. Yeah.
That's correct. Now, getting back to the whole sound thing, the reason why, for anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, when either Wendy is speaking or I am speaking, put your hand on the speaker of your phone if you're listening from your phone, or put the hand over the speaker of your computer. You will feel vibration.
Mm-hmm.
That's what sound is. It's vibration. And once it goes in through the ear canal, all the different bones start vibrating, and then it sends that signal to the brain, and the brain interprets those vibrations. That's what we call sound.
Yes.
So none of us actually has heard anything at all in our lives. Our brains have simply interpreted vibration. Everything is vibration. Every cell in your body resonates at frequencies. And, this is fact. This is scientific fact. And as far as things we can't explain with science, as a scientist, I will tell you that there's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as miracles. Only science that hasn't been explained yet. Now, that doesn't take away from the romance or your belief systems. It just means that there's an explanation for everything. It's just we're not that bright. So we haven't figured it out yet.
And the thing I love is, and I particularly appreciate it when scientists go, I don't know yet, rather than the pontification. This is right, that's wrong. And yet, remember Copernicus?
Well said.
Flat.
Something. Yeah.
Until he said, no, it's not.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
and there's one other thing I just want to clarify as well. I don't believe in fact or truth anymore. I noticed that when I believed in something as fact or truth, it stopped me from thinking about it. So now I have what I call current understanding. That's it. It opens my mind to information and knowledge. And that means that my opinions change all the time, which is interesting, because what made me realize this was I had a lot of clients start telling me, Morry, I've heard you talk 10 years ago, and you're saying things completely different from what you said then. Why should I believe anything you say? And I said, actually, very good point. You shouldn't believe anything I say. What I say comes from my opinion. If it resonates with you, reimagine it, reinterpret it in your own terms, and then decide if you want to believe you.
Yeah.
Don't think about believing me. The other thing is that I have an open mind. You should be grateful that I have an open mind. I'm a firm believer that ancient knowledge is valuable as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Modern knowledge is much better. We know a lot more now than we knew 5,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If something from 5,000 years ago hasn't changed, it hasn't evolved, that's unnatural, in my opinion. Everything changes. Mountains change, rocks change, water changes. I've changed. I've seen pictures of me when I was 16, 18 years old. I don't even look like I could be my own father. I don't even look like me at all. It's hilarious. So anyway, I just encourage people to think differently, think outside the box. Don't believe experts. Look, experts, the most popular self-help people in the world, anybody in this world, they can only think in terms of themselves. They can't think in terms of you. They're not you. They don't have they're not your height. They're not your sex. They're not your weight. They didn't have your parents. They didn't have your schooling. They didn't have your religion. They didn't have your clothes, your turtles, your cats, your dogs. There's so many things that are involved here that all they can really do is tell you, look, I'm crazy successful, and this is how I did it, or this is how I'm teaching you. But remember, you're not me. Yeah. So reinterpret, reimagine, reinvent, then decide if you want to take action. I think that's the reason why most self-help doesn't help people. Why people try things, they listen to the stories, they listen to the teachings, they're very impressed, they're very excited, and then they're back where they started, 10 months later, or even less time later. And I think that's why. Because don't take what I say or what anybody says, and this is my opinion again, so some coaches will probably get pretty mad at me here, but I would say don't take anything anybody says as a blueprint for your life. It's a blueprint for their life, because that's the only, place they can speak from. You reinvent it and reimagine it, and then it's a blueprint for your life.
One of the things that my coach regularly says is, try this on for size.
I like that.
So she'll come up with a suggestion, and it's something that she knows has worked for her, and she knows it's worked for others of her clients. Mm-hmm. But she prefaces it with, try this on for size. So it's not you must do this. I've worked with other people where it's very definitely, this is advice, and I think you should do this. Well, one, should. Mm-hmm. Two, it worked for you. I don't know that it'll work for me. Have you invited me? Because frankly, if you tell me something can or can't be done, I usually dig my heels in and go, really? Just watch me.
I love it.
So the naysayers that I've had along the way have said all sorts of things about what I can't do. And it's been a case of, just watch me. Because I am a bit of a rebel at heart.
That's why I love you.
So this is what I'm saying. So absolutely, I agree with you that what is fact, what is opinion? And I think that is something that when we have such a black and white view of life, my opinion, there are a lot of people who will give you facts when, as you say, they are opinions. Mm-hmm. They're strong opinions, and it's backed up with their evidence. But what I'm hearing you say is you have empirical evidence that the entrainment is part of the, as you say, the neurological soup.
It's a natural process that the brain goes through anyway. But that being said, facts change, which means there aren't facts to begin with. As we get more information, as we learn ways to measure things better and more accurately, we learn new information. Look at information we knew 100 years ago as fact.
Yep.
It's all changed now because our technology has changed. Our understanding has changed. We've studied it 100 years longer now. We have a different understanding. So what was a fact then isn't a fact now, which means it wasn't a fact in the first place. And if you keep going back in time, you'll find nonstop examples of this, of where we believed as a society, as a race, certain things that aren't true now, because we have different understanding now. If that's the case, that as you go, like, let's go 5,000 years ago and move forward in 100-year increments, that every 100 years, there's things we thought were facts before that we now know weren't facts, because now we think we know the facts again, but it keeps changing, then isn't it reasonable to assume that what we think is a fact today, in 100 years, we'll know more and it won't be really a fact?
Yeah.
This is why I believe in, not in fact and truth anymore, but in
present understanding.
Yeah, just in having that ability to keep an open mind, because as long as we have that current understanding, sure, it seems to work, but do we really know why it works? We don't really
say it might work for me.
We have an excuse.
It may not work for you.
But even that, I mean, it may not work for you. And it may work for you, or it may seem like it's working for you, but in 10 minutes from now, something else might work better. There's an old line that says, on the way to what I wanted, I found something better. That's an example of someone who has their mind open and their eyes open and their ears open. All I'm saying is, if you resonate with something a so-called expert tells you, or a guru tells you, great, but don't just follow them blindly. You're not a dog on a leash. Do what you think you should do, but keep your eyes and ears open to change things. When I came across entrainment, it was to help alleviate my depression and my suicidal thoughts. It didn't help me. That's why I have innovated so many new technologies and techniques into brainwave entrainment, because I had to change it to make it work for me. Even though the research said it should have worked, it wasn't working. I had no choice but to innovate. So I did. So that's what I mean. What existed wasn't right for me. So now I try to come up with enough innovations, because a lot of what I have may not be right for you. But I would like to believe that I can come up with enough variations on the technology so that if someone looked hard enough, they'd find something of mine that did help them to help themselves. Because I believe it's possible, and that makes it possible.
That's it, isn't it? Rather than looking at what's wrong with this picture, what's possible as a result of where I am now. Well said,
really well said.
And that's the again, you're thinking out from where you are at the moment, and that's going back to what you were saying, that it's actually very difficult to anticipate, because I'm not there already. How do I need to be? What's my? I mean, Einstein's famous thing of the thinking that got you to where you are now won't get you to where you want to be. There is that switching round in. Okay, this is a bit of a mind. Where do I go with this? How do I get there? That's when, yes, if you talk to people who have gone further down the line and they've said, think about this, try this on for size, see if this works for you. And that's where you model from, right. You see other people doing it, you model from there and go, well, that bit worked. But as you say, their filters are different from mine. Sure. Their model of the world, their map of the world is different to mine. So what can I take? But it does require some action.
Yes. But that's the thing. You said it perfectly. We don't understand that we all live in bubbles. We do. We've always lived in bubbles. This is nothing new. We've always lived in bubbles. The problem is that we think we don't. So when I look around me and I'm in a group of people, I just assume they see everything I see. But they're not seeing everything I see, because they live in their bubble. They're noticing things I'm not noticing, because they are more tuned to those things. I'm noticing things that they're not noticing because I'm more tuned to those things. Words have power. You know what? I would, like this in front of you. Words have incredible power, but not just because they have incredible power, but because I could say, I believe in God, and you can say you believe in God, and we can go happily skipping down the street holding hands, thinking we believe the same thing because we said the same word. But maybe my God is 400 feet tall, has a hairy chest, and needles coming out of his shoulders. And your God has a white beard and sits in a throne in heaven. Totally different concepts of what God is.
Yeah.
And yet we think we agree. Right? No, words are everything. We need to live, each of us, like about 1 million years, just so we have enough time to explain our definition of each word we use when we're having a conversation with someone.
I don't know whether I've explained this one to you, Morry, but when I moved over to Australia, my first networking meeting, I tended to troll this one out very regularly. My first networking meeting, somebody complimented me on my pants. Well, I got very embarrassed, bright red, excused myself to go to the ladies, thought my flies were undone. Because in the UK, pants are what you wear next to your skin. So I got in there and went, all right, composed myself, went back into the room. And somebody who had observed this, who knew where I was from, sidled up to me and went, she was talking about your trousers, don't you? I went, trousers, pants. Now, I knew pants were trousers in America, but I didn't know that was the case in Australia.
Sure.
Same language? Really?
Yeah. And that's an innocuous example. Like, it doesn't actually create, a war. Right?
Yes.
Just imagine
go down a very interesting road there.
Misunderstanding that comes from words.
Particularly when they don't translate very well from one language to another. Oh, now that is an entirely new conversation. We could go on for ages on that one. Morry, I'm going to pull it back a bit. You talked to me about triliminal training. What's triliminal?
Okay, so I had mentioned to you that the technology as it existed in brainwave entrainment wasn't helpful for me, even though I thought it should be. So I got even more depressed, but then it struck me, maybe I'm supposed to innovate this. Maybe I need to do something to change it. So one of the innovations I did was I came up with something called triliminals. So try 3. Basically, I talk to you in the left ear with information for the right hemisphere.
Yes.
I talk to you in the right ear with information for the left hemisphere. That's how information transfer works in the brain.
Yep.
In this side goes to this side. This side goes to this side. Then I'm speaking to you again in the middle of the head as well for both hemispheres. And I often talk over myself. So it sounds like you're in a crowd of people and everybody's just talking.
Right.
And your brain can handle millions of processes every second, so it can easily handle what I'm giving it. But what it does is it challenges the mind. It kind of shuts down the awareness because you start trying to listen to everything, and then you generally try to listen to one side or the middle, and then ultimately you just give up because you can't. It's just too jumbled up. It doesn't make sense. Your brain kind of shuts down and reorganizes itself at a higher level, just like with exercise. With exercise, when you work hard enough, you get micro tears in the muscle, which then repair and rebuild to create stronger muscle that can now handle the extra work. That's the concept with triliminals. Now, it's not just me talking to you here, me talking to you here, me talking to you here. I have phraseology that does like it's like in series. So, hi, how are you? And then I have others that are just over top of each other, encoded, so that it helps to reprogram the mind. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking. So maybe I'm going to say something you don't agree with, or maybe I'm going to say something that doesn't make sense for you. Because I also include 2 other factors and the way that I mix the phraseology together, the way I mix the scripts together, that allows the brain to reprogram itself based on what you think and say, as opposed to what I'm saying. It takes what I'm saying as kind of like holding your hand, but you're still guiding yourself. I'm a step behind. So that means if I say something you don't agree with, it's either going to ignore it or reword it in your mind so that you are saying what you believe, what you makes sense for you. And part of that is done because in the background of all of my recordings, including the triliminals, I have a shh sound. Mm-hmm. And I call that a relative of pink noise, because what that is it's over 600 separate frequencies overlaid upon each other. And they are designed to stimulate different regions of the brain. So that when you're hearing the audible pulse, the ba, 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 ba part, so you hear shh, ba, 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 and me talking. When you hear the ba, 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 ba part, it has a stronger effect on the brain and on the mind, because it's now certain frequencies that are sensitive to different regions of the brain. And those regions of the brain are more likely to activate as a result of that, making the entrainment that I create much stronger. Without it,
so you're priming those areas to go, hello, watch out.
Kind of waking them up and saying, pay attention, I've got some information for you.
Yeah.
And that's what a triliminal does. It's designed specifically to do something which I call stop the negative reflexive thought process. Mm-hmm. So the negative reflexive thought process, an example of that would be, do you get calls at midnight often, Wendy?
My phone's off.
Oh, okay. Well, let's say your phone was on and you got a call. Mm-hmm. Most people would be, who's died, who's sick, who got hit by a car in a car accident.
Yes.
Why would we just randomly go to the negative side of everything all the time? It's always negative. Most of our life, the negative thing never happens, and yet we reflexively go to there. Mm-hmm. Well, this technology helps to reprogram the mind away from that kind of thinking.
Right.
And when I first designed it, it was for my quantum confidence course. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not really a course, a program. And when it got introduced, people said, oh, I love this thing. Can you do one on this topic, on this topic, on this topic? Mm-hmm. At the end of this month, I have a membership site now that offers these triliminals. I have, at the end of this month, I will have 158 sets of triliminals.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been doing them for about 13 or 14 years now. Every month for new for the membership.
Excellent. I mean, I have heard some of your triliminals, and now having talked this through with you, it makes more sense, because yes, I've been hearing and I've been aware of, hang on, that's that ear, that's that ear. I wasn't necessarily aware of the top bit, but it's just hang on. I can't handle this, and as you say, you get to that threshold level where your brain just goes, I'm out of here. And I can see now from having talked to you about it, how the scrambling then enables the, okay, so what are you going to do with this?
Yeah.
And it's then down to your own chemistry to program in what's right for you.
Yes.
Thank you for explaining
that's exactly what happens.
Brilliant. Now we could geek out, you and I, because we're on the same wavelength. I think you're probably, no, you're not probably, you are way in advance of me in terms of the science behind this. However, I mean, from the brainwaves and things, I've looked at EEGs in the past when I worked as a speechy with people who had epilepsy. So I've read EEGs and so I'm like, oh right, there was a spike. But you know that when you're looking at an EEG tracer, it's a snapshot. So unless somebody is actually having some form of brain seizure, some form of disruption in the brain waves at that time, it won't show. And people have gone, well, I went all the way to have all those lovely little sticky things on my head, and it didn't show anything. I said, well, at that particular point, you were not having a seizure. So yes. Anyway, that's me in my past, in a previous life. So,
well, the thing is, a lot of people don't realize, some people who meditate, for example, will say, I'm in theta when I meditate, or I'm in alpha when I meditate, or whatever. That's a bit of a misnomer. Even when you're sleeping, you have all forms of brainwave activity happening in your brain. Mm-hmm. Sleep actually is a cycle. It's cyclical. So, the first cycle is usually about 90 minutes long in the average healthy adult. And it will go from beta to alpha to theta to delta, back up to theta, back up to beta, back up to alpha, back here, back there, all over the place. And then they get shorter and shorter as time progresses. The last 2 or 3 sleep cycles generally don't even have delta as a part of them. And we tend to dream, by the way, in theta. So if you were to hook up an EEG with all the little electrodes and probes, you would see the brain naturally colors are assigned to let you know if it's beta or delta or whatever. But, you'd see it just lights up and turns off and lights up and turns off and lights up and turns off. It's very difficult to achieve a dominant brainwave frequency. But in the past, you see, I believe the brain is designed to have these like reasonable lengths of time where you are having dominant brainwave frequencies, allowing your brain to create the neurochemistry it's designed to function on. I believe this is why we have so much depression, so much dysfunction, so much PTSD and anxiety and stress and all these other things, because our brains are so distracted, right? By so many different things all the time and so many different stresses. And we know so much more than we knew, say, 5,000 years ago when we were huddling in caves and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable to assume that our brains are much more hyperactive and scattered, which means that we're not having the natural brainwave activity for the periods of time we used to have them in. Meaning, it's not surprising to me that we're depressed and we have all these problems, because we're not getting the natural brainwave chemistry our brains were designed to function on. Imagine a car as an example. Actually, let's go bicycle. Imagine a bicycle as an example. A cave dweller, if you and I were walking side by side and we were 5,000 years ago and I just dropped dead, you'd probably turn around and go, huh, and keep walking. No concept of death, no concept of disease, no concept of politics, no concept of this or that or the other thing. You got afraid and reactionary when you were threatened. But when the threat goes away, you'd go back to normal being. Well, we're being threatened all the time. So we don't have that, good fortune. Cave people riding a bicycle with a nice comfortable seat, full tires, brand new treads, new brakes, all the spokes are nice and tight. Everything's beautiful. We are riding the same bike, but one of the tires is flat, the other one is bald, the gears are all screwed up, the chain is rusty. You see what I mean? Maybe there's no seat. That's very uncomfortable riding a bike without a seat, by the way. So you can imagine why, that we will look at a National Geographic show showing an old, tribe that has stayed away from society or is in the middle of the African outback or something, and you see them living in mud huts, and you think, oh, these poor people, they don't have air conditioning, they don't have cars, they don't have airplanes, they don't have this, they don't have that. And these people are probably looking at us going, oh, these poor people, what kind of lives do they have?
Yeah.
We're at peace, we live in harmony, and they're panicky all the time. So who has it better? Who has it worse? Right? It's a matter of we're not allowed to be natural. Brainwave entrainment allows you to, at least at times, achieve those natural, not supernatural, but natural states of mind, which allow for the production of chemistry in quantities we are designed to function on. In other words, changing the tire, inflating it to a proper depth, putting on a nice comfortable seat, changing the brakes, right? Changing the chain. Now, all of a sudden, we're a lot healthier and happier, because everything is the way it should be, as opposed to the way it is. Now, I have people tell me, yeah, but Morry, 5,000 years ago is 5,000 years ago, we've evolved. Yeah, sure we have, but ultimately we still have two nostrils like we had then. We still have two eyes, two ears. We still have a brain. The brain is a little bit bigger, but it still functions the same way neurochemically. So
the neural system has not evolved at the same speed as civilization has.
That's correct. And that's why understanding is true power. Knowledge really isn't power, because understanding is power. Someone once told me, like with school, you don't have to have a good memory if you understand why something is.
Yes.
And that's the truth in general. You don't have to remember something. All you need to do is understand, and then you can figure it out. If you remember, then it's like, okay, good, you have a photographic memory. What happens if that photo doesn't exist in your book? Then you're kind of screwed. But if you understand, you can think
But
And
that's
that's
it,
what
isn't it?
we're about thinking.
Our school system is designed to teach us to remember and not to think.
In
Because
university, I
again, we
remember.
could go down a lovely little rabbit hole on this one in terms of still based on the Victorian idea of developing good little citizens to sit in factories and work like that. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, hey, one quick thing. I was in university and I wrote my honors thesis in my psychology discipline, and the professor gave me like a C or a C plus, and they wrote as a comment at the back, it's okay to have an original thought as long as someone had it before you and published it. He literally wrote that. I got so mad I burned it and smoked a joint. But I wish I had saved that, because I would have framed that part of the essay and held it up there. It's okay to have an original thought as long as someone else had it before you. But I couldn't quote. My entire thesis was original. There were no footnotes, nothing. The bibliography had nothing in it because it was entirely original. And he only passed me because, he liked me as a person. But otherwise, I would have failed the course. For that,
boy, did you challenge the system.
I lost. I had to drop out of school because I couldn't take it anymore. I got my honors degree and I said, enough of this. By the time I were to become, a doctor, because at that time I wanted to be a psychologist. By the time I would have had my master's and then my PhD, I wouldn't have had any more original thoughts in my head. They would have ironed them all out of me.
Knocked them out of you. Yeah. Anyway, Morry, we'll have to wind up now, sir. Now, one of the things that we call quirky inspirations, because I've been described as quirky a number of occasions, I think you've kind of given us a bit of quirk as well. Generally, people do not have any concept of the neurological soup, the hormonal soup, the biochemical soup, which you've explained to us. So thank you very much for that. The inspirations bit is around the people that come on our podcasts have an inspirational story. Now, you've told us of the shift you experienced, your depression, your multiple suicidal ideations and even attempts, and how you were either going to live or going to die, and you decided, no, I'm going to live, and let's work out how I can live best. Now, that is an amazing story and very inspirational. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I wonder, the thing about, for me, that's important, and we've alluded to this, is the internal scripts that we run. Now, my backstory: when I was 2, I had an abandonment experience in hospital when my mother couldn't come for me, because back in the 60s, parents weren't allowed to stay in hospital. The decision I made at that point was that my voice didn't matter, and everybody else's voice did. That internal script coloured my life choice to be a speech pathologist, go figure, at a subconscious level. I did not know this. This was an unconscious script that wasn't uncovered until 50 plus years later. So I've now consciously flipped that. Would I change the everybody else's voice matters? No. Everybody else's voice matters is still accurate for me, because, hey, I'm working with speakers to get them out on stage. And I've now flipped the internal bit to be my voice matters too, and I'm going to get my voice out there. Yeah. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, Morry, have you got any inspirational scripts that you could share with us? Some people call them mantras, some people call them mottos. Anything that you would like to share with us from your perspective?
Well, if I had to, there'd be 2 quick things. The one is, happiness is a choice. For the first 4 years of my life, I chose to be miserable, not realizing I was making that choice.
Yes.
But now I choose to be happy, as opposed to choosing to be right, or choosing to be moody, or choosing to be an a-hole, or choosing to be any number of terrible things. I choose to be happy. That's really what I choose now. I feel that we as a race are going through puberty. And that's why things are so hectic and weird and all over the place. But if we choose to look for the good things, then we don't have to see what we think of as bad. You see, I don't believe there's good and bad. I don't think that exists. I think that's just a human concept we've developed to disempower us or ourselves. Even disease isn't bad. Even death isn't bad. Because when you look at the nature of the planet, we're all going to be here for a limited time.
Yeah.
How we go is how we go. It's like a snap of the fingers. That's how long we're here. And for me, it's important to remember that there's lessons from everything.
Yes.
And I believe, like you had mentioned Einstein before, I believe it was Einstein who was at least credited with, we are energy, and energy can't be destroyed. It can only be altered.
Yeah.
So I believe what makes us different from an android or a robot is that we're not made from metal and wires and oil. We're made from blood and sinews and tissues instead. But what is it that makes your robot different from mine or unique? It's that energy that's coursing through all of us, that makes our heart pulse, that activates keeps our brain going and our thoughts processing. We live in a house. All of us live in a house, this house. And when it's time to move, we move.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's our thoughts that govern how we experience the time that we're here. So I encourage all of you to say there is no such thing as good or bad. Stop judging things, especially as bad. Instead, see things for what they are, a lesson. Everything is a lesson. I thought I was Hitler in a previous life because I was so miserable and everything was terrible. And I've had it feels like thousands of injuries and, pain pretty much every day of my life. And I thought, horrible life, horrible life, horrible life. You know what? I think life is wonderful. And all these so-called horrible things that I was calling horrible and I was calling bad, without them, I wouldn't be the person I am today.
Yes. Or
the person I will be tomorrow, or to be more accurate, the person I will be when tomorrow gets here.
Yeah.
Becomes the present.
Nicely said. Because that's the thing, isn't it? The thoughts are governed by our words. So, yes. Morry, on that note, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We've got your information in the show notes. And
thank you very much.
I would strongly recommend everybody to connect with Morry. If you have any concept of neuro stuff and you want to geek out with him, this is the guy to talk to. Put aside a decent amount of time because he's brilliant. We can talk all day. Okay, so that's one thing. There's a lot of information on his website about his entrainment stuff. Listen in. It's fascinating. You'll get and you'll give up and you'll do that scramble and you'll feel a lot better for it. For now, Morry, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation on quirky inspirations.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for inviting me here. I always enjoy speaking with you. You're enlightening, you are inspiring, or inspiring. We can change words, invent words. But you're an amazing personality. And I'm happy, believe it or not, that you had the challenges that you had because they helped to make you who you are. Indeed. And who you are is something pretty amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I honor you, sir. Thank you. For now, bye from us.